There, now look at that one. I think we've got a photograph. Can you show that? Just
a bit further along, isn't it?
Over that one. There you are. Look, let's take that paper away. So there again, positive identification. And
it's similar to that. It's got the kidney shape there, but it's got the Wellington, not the Wellington, the what's the base called again? It's
Canterbury.
Canterbury, sorry.
Wellington was close. I'll call it a Wellington from now on. Put my magazines in a Wellington.
No.
But this was quite a nice one. It was stamped by the maker, which is Holland. They made quite a lot of this fine furniture. Beautiful quality, nice lines, machine carving here, typical little bell shape there, and fretted everywhere, little gilt metal. It's a brass gallery, gilded. Just a nice example of Victorian furniture. And again, after 1860, but not much. By the 1880s, it had got very much heavier. Yeah. Very much heavier. Then, of course, in the...
Gothic revival?
Yeah, the Gothic revival. A.W. Augustus Welby Pugin. And you'll see that, of course, reflected in the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster. Loudon's publication, which he worked a lot at the Palace of Westminster too, 1840s. I think Westminster was finished around about 1849, just coming up to the Great Exhibition. So everything became ecclesiastical. This reflected our piety at the time. When child prostitution was rife, we had more piety in society than ever. I mean, it was just an extraordinary period of paradox, really, total paradox.
Workhouses and
everything
else going on. Yeah.
And so you find in nice little pieces a little book carrier, not necessarily from the home of a vicar. This would be somebody who thought this was the latest style, and they'd have an example of it in their library.
Still got some good value on it now, there.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Still sought after.
This and very much, but you see so many church spires now in the Gothic style, what we call Gothic style. Actually, it's a revival of Norman, Saxon, early English, decorated and perpendicular periods from 900 to 1200, just before the big plague, and they're all in there. Your complete study of ecclesiastical architecture is in one of these pieces.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, it's worth a study in its own. You know, when you see the spires with these little bits on, little bobbles on all the way down, they're called crockets. I thought you'd like to know that, because when you're driving along with your children, you say, look at the crockets on that spire. They'll put a glazed look will come over their eyes, and they'll be asleep within a few minutes when you tell them all about it.
But why is it called that, though?
Well, the crocket?
Yes.
It was an architectural term from the decorated period. Here, look at this. This is from the Great Exhibition of 1862, the second Great Exhibition in London. And this shows the extent to which we went. You wouldn't have a font indoors, but you'll find this type of hall lantern, perhaps not with angels on, but this decoration, in the new massive houses being built for new money. Yep. Money coming from the north of England, from coal, from huge land ownership, suddenly had to outdo their neighbours, really.
Yeah, we've sold quite a few of these in our sale room, and they're run-of-the-mill almost. I mean, not so run-of-the-mill, not like the Canterburys and stuff, but they do sell. They do sell a lot.
I'm sure. And most of them are wonderful quality. Certainly these are, of course, exhibition pieces. This was a different class of furniture, which now began to appear after 1851, of furniture made specifically for exhibition display, of which the leading manufacturers, I think, in London at the time were Holland and Son, no question about that. Although they're, you know, I'm not doing down the others. I mean, there were many, but Holland's actually, they were the people that actually oversaw Wellington's funeral. Apart from it, they didn't just make furniture; they did all sorts of other things as well. They were very well connected. There's another example. This again from the Great Exhibition. These stands you see quite frequently, and this type of palmette. See, it's a sort of hangover from the Regency time, isn't it? Mm. But there's something about the proportion which makes it distinctly 19th century, distinctly later. I don't know what it is. It's a combination of these things. So you've got cluster columns and Regency palmettes.
Slate.
And the two together. It's slate. Yeah, slate. And a small version of that you'd see in a clock. Now, they're slate clocks. Yeah. And a friend of mine who used to buy them for £1 a piece used to save all the works and sell for scrap. And he built a wall of all these slate clocks. And one day he was looking at it and he thought there's £1 million wall there because he used to buy them for £1 and then they were worth 300.
Now they're back down to £1.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yes, because they're wonderful movements.
Yeah.
All Paris movements.
Nobody wants them.
No. Okay, so now then we come to the Great Exhibition. The Great Exhibition of Arts and Sciences and industry from all known parts of the globe. It was built, as everybody knows, by Paxton from his quick sketches on an envelope, built in a matter of months, and used 30 miles of iron girders and 900,000 square feet of glass. And nobody believed that it would stand up. It was tall enough to take the great trees in Hyde Park. And if we look from the other angle, you'll see that that is a great transept which goes from one end to the other. There were 15,000 exhibitors. Can you have 15,000 people? You know what?
That's just the exhibitors.
Yeah. You try organising Olympia.
From all over the world. From all over the world as well.
All over the world. Yeah. Every country of the known world was there. 6 million people visited in 6 months. 1 million a month visited. And a lot of people came from the continent, and they could get on a train in Paris, and they were in London here in 11 hours, non-stop.
That's quicker than the Eurostar these
days.
It's
not
with
bad,
all the stoppages.
Is it? And they guaranteed it. There you can see one of the great avenues. And they were so sceptical that they thought this can't possibly stand up. So imagine you're setting up your stand, right? And to prove it would stand up, they got the army to bring in carriages full of cannonballs with a couple of horses trundling up and down these aisles to make sure it didn't fall over. What would have happened if it had fallen over? Nobody thought. But as the Queen was going to open it,
they had to be careful.
Well, it had to be done. But I mean, imagine the chaos.
Well, anyway, the organisation, there must have been an army of people.
Sure. And here we've got India. America had one of the largest stands, of course. They showed everything from a floating church to a piano big enough for 5 people to play, and an elevating hat, which you could sort of pull levers, and so if it got too hot, you had this sort of little, like a blind effect that opened up.
So it's sort of a show of the Industrial Revolution.
Really, absolutely. Yeah. It changed the world, because there were then continual great exhibitions all over the world, from Vienna to Chicago, Paris, of course. Let's have a look at... whoops. We must go back to this one. The next one, I mean. Where do I point it?
That way.
You
get carried away with those clickers.
I know. Well, it's this my new machine. There we are.
Wow.
There we are. Now, if we look very closely, there is Her Majesty. This is the great transept, right? 1,850 feet long. Easy to remember. It was 1851. So we've had all the details about it. And there she is. She walked around and she visited every stall. She walked for 8 hours it took. Wow. She and Prince Albert, who, of course, much maligned, I think. I mean, he was basically responsible for this. Mm-hmm. He actually put all this together. And I never really got sufficient credit.
So he was sort of the driving force to make it happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. In every picture you see of the opening ceremony, you see people from all over the world, ambassadors are here. There's a little Chinaman there, sort of like a onesie.
This one here?
Yes, like a baby growing up on. And anyway, he accompanied the Queen and the royal party around. He was 3 people away from the Queen, following behind. And this was the opening ceremony, and as it all closed at about 9 o'clock at night, everybody said, "Where's the Chinese ambassador gone?" And so, I thought he was with you. I said, I thought he was with you. Well, who was it? Nobody knew. So, well, who was he? So, I don't know. And only later did they find that that was a man called He Sing, who had a junk on the Thames, and he showed people around for a shilling a time.
Had nothing to do with the entourage at all?
No, so he dressed up and got in and stood next to the Queen, and
Fantastic.
everybody accepted him.
What a great skill. It's a bit like that chap who went into the Manchester United photograph at the end of when they won the FA Cup. And he had nothing, he just had the kit on, jumped in, got into the team photograph as well. So he did the same thing.
Exactly.
And he's world famous because of it now.
Yeah. He Sing, my favourite story.
He Sing, fantastic.
Yeah. Now, see if I can get this machine right now. One of the things that happened, we were talking about clocks and so forth. One of the things that happened was that we seemed to lose proportion in much of the design. And it's as if two people designed this clock. One designed the cherub at the top, or the putti, and the other the clock, because it's totally disproportionate. Yeah. But I tell you what, that would be worth a lot of money today. That, of course, is enamel with this wonderful, wonderful sort of Boucher-type painting on the
impressive
front.
workings inside with it going around.
But, I mean, that ridiculously large child. And then you get the faux Adam style just coming in now, just coming 1860s, 1870s. Anyway, it's just a fun thing. Then, because we've got all this machinery, we then have an anti-machinery movement called the Warwick School of Carving. It's almost a generic term because there were carving schools all over the country. Basically, they were trying to prove that what could be done by machine could be done far better by hand. The motive behind it was good, but it was impractical because economically it was impossible. You simply couldn't keep up with it. It couldn't be done.
The manpower it takes to make a cellaret, for instance, would
sure
take you a month to make one, whereas in the industrial side they'd be able to make 55.
Oh, sure. So it didn't last very long. Its effect lasted a long time because what happened was this was the age of chivalry. This was, first of all, you had the Elizabethan revival, which we'll look at in a minute, after the novels of Sir Walter Scott. And let's just deal with that actually briefly for a moment. The Elizabethan revival started with those novels. So by 1825, 1830, old Elizabethan furniture look was popular, was fashionable, but it didn't fit. So you could go into Berwick Market, which is now totally different. Well, the market's still there, but in those days it was purely for furniture. And I'm talking 1830, 1840, 1850. And you could buy bits of old furniture, Elizabethan beds, bedsteads, chairs, panelled rooms, whatever. And you could buy and you say, well, I have a piece of that, and I want a buffet. And somebody would make you a buffet or a court cupboard. And it would be basically old, but some new bits to fit the new home. And they kept doing that, and they right through the 19th century. But by sort of 1850, 1860, the supply of old had quit. It's dried up. So they simply made fakes. And they were making fakes of Elizabethan furniture throughout the 19th century. That's
you
what
get
you've
the
got to be aware of.
mock Tudor houses now. And
sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then pure mock in the sort of early 1900s, when we get into Art Nouveau. But for this period, a lot of dangerous things, dangerous for money-wise, because if you have a good Elizabethan refectory table, you know it's worth £100,000. How do you tell that from a table that made 200 years ago? It's had a lot of use, a lot of wear. Quite difficult, quite difficult.
If it's made in the same way.
Made in exactly the same way. The one guide is that they never used pre-shrunk furniture, timber. So if you see a very fine piece of Elizabethan furniture where the wood is all cracked, it means that it's not seasoned. And it was used to make it look old, because in the Victorian times they assumed anything that was old was crude. Of course, it wasn't crude. It was beautifully made. Highly, highly, technically beautifully made. And so anything that looks crude and cracked and gnarled and old won't won't be old. It'll be just crude.
Crude, yeah.
Yeah. So that
shrunk
led,
and
that was the Elizabethan revival was one movement. Then this age of chivalry, where you get the hunter figure with his club and his bear skin and so forth.
His hawk on
Yeah,
his arm.
and hawks and so forth. This is a great hunting lodge piece by the Warwick School of Carving, all done again. Typically, such an amalgam that you can tell it's 19th century. It couldn't be anything else. Okay. The problem was that it was very huge, very very bulky, but they made the most wonderful sideboard for Queen Victoria, and she didn't like it. Oh, no. And it was cut in half. And one half, for many, many years, was in a hotel in Lincoln. Nobody knows where the other half is. So there's a sleeper for you.
Okay.
Yeah, you watch out. You might find it. Might be in one of those holes in the garden, but it might be somewhere. And it was just like that. And they cut it in half. And the one in Lincoln was shoved up against a wall, so it looked like a nice corner unit.
Okay.
The Warwick School of Carving. The problem with it was that it got a lot of enthusiastic amateurs. And so there were classes in the evening in villages all over the country where people would learn to carve. What do you carve on? Well, you couldn't afford a new bit of furniture, so you go to Grandma and say, Granny, have you got a little old table or a chair or anything I can practice? Oh, of course, there's one in the attic. And they'd get out the most beautiful little Tudor piece, take it along to what we call the Vicar's carving class. And there you see this type of carving like this and like this. So always beware. The Vicar's carving class did more damage than any other thing.
Well, made the last existing ones more expensive, I'm sure. But
well, probably, yes. Whoops, I'm very good at this, aren't I? So, of the periods where we've been talking about, and I've been sort of denigrating some of it, there was some wonderful, wonderful things that were made, which weren't made for exhibitions, but were made as standard. And
just
the company of Gillows, this was wonderful. Look, suddenly you get, this is not machine carved. And you get that freedom. These are just floating off. These scrolls are going everywhere. So while all the other machinery stuff was going on, there were companies making beautiful pieces of furniture like this. Not, as I say, not exhibition pieces, just lovely. Choice of timber, which is the finest Indian rosewood.
But this would be expensive.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It cost as much then, in real terms, as it would now. Probably 25,000, 30,000 quid. Oh, yes, indeed. But then quality will out.
Yeah, one will last through, shine through.
Then we have the Oriental influence. Yes.
Which was very big. That's late?
After 1856, when Japan had been sealed off for 200 years, and they'd only really traded with the Dutch, and certainly not with the English. And then an American gunboat went up the Yangtze River and as usual, said, I think we'll trade with you, or boom.
Yeah, and they did.
And at the same time, and coincidentally, we had the enlightened government, the Meiji, in 1862, which disbanded the old feudal system. They did away with the samurai warriors, or samurai system, and which meant that the armourers and people that supplied the court and the old feudal system had no market for their wares, and so they started to produce for the Western world. And one man in particular, Lafcadio O'Hearn, had been over and was smitten with Japan. In fact, he even took a Japanese name. He was a designer, an artiste. And they started to export for the 1862 exhibition. A company called Farmer and Rogers in Regent Street took a stand and did very well. And they wanted, their manager wanted to increase this, because he said, this Japanese ware is going a long way. This is a market winner. And they said, no, we think we don't really want to do it. Not very keen. So he said, all right, I shall start myself. He left, and he started his own shop opposite, and his name was Arthur Lazenby Liberty. And he took, from Farmer and Rogers, he took the Japanese
Liberties,
Yeah, and started his own shop. And of course, Farmer and Rogers disappeared, and Liberties is still there.
Okay,
They were selling Not this, but they were selling fine Japanese works of art, bronzes, ivory carvings, kakeme, and so forth and so on. At the same time, bamboo furniture became extremely popular. Again, remember we'd had flat pack bamboo furniture in the Brighton Pavilion, right? Well, it sort of went out of fashion because it wasn't very stable, but now we could produce it so cheaply, we didn't have to import it, we made it here. And
faux bamboo as well.
Faux bamboo, and we made it in America, or it was made in America. And that little piece had a label on the back, and it said, the American Japanese Furniture Company, which I think is wonderful.
Brilliant.
Yeah. The American.
What would that be worth now, though? I mean,
£250 or something like that. I mean, I wish I'd got it now. Just because it's such fun. But this came like every hall stands again. So there are iron hall stands, bamboo hall stands.
Well, a massive. I mean, it got mass produced, didn't it? Because everyone was buying, going to the chinoiserie market. I mean, the bamboo tables and whatnots and everything now. I mean, we still get quite a lot of that coming through the auctions. Everyone's grandma's got one, and people like them. They're coming back into fashion again a little bit.
Certainly with little panels of lacquer.
That's right.
Yeah, and there are some very fine ones. It's worth buying. I think it's good. It's decorative, and it's fun.